Welcome, and I hope all of you have been having a fabulous festival as we have. It's a spoil for choice. You don't know which session to go to. But my suggestion to everybody always is go for bits and pieces of many sessions. And the ones that you like, you can watch it, as you know, online. We'll be taking off the live feed at the end of every day, but it'll then get reposted starting from the 7th of whatever this month is. So that's the way to catch the rest of the sessions that you really want to do, and you have the whole year to do that. I'm absolutely delighted that we are able to have this particular conversation, which is after my heart. Because I have long hair, people think that I have some kind of wisdom. I don't. But one of the things that I did start doing about 35 or 36 years ago is having stopped at a traffic light, maybe 38 years ago, having stopped at a traffic light, I sort of looked around, the kid sort of knocked on the window, and Punitha and I, my wife and I, were in the car, and we rolled down the window, gave the child something, and I started a conversation with the kid, and then realized that while our kids at home had access to almost everything that money or love or families can buy, these kids on the street had nothing. No roof over their head, no safe space to dream, perchance to perhaps sleep, not a square meal, a hot meal to eat, and certainly no warm clothes in winter. And we set up something called the Salam Balak Trust with 25 kids and 3 staff. And that, of course, there was a film called Salam Bombay that Meera Nair made, and today we look after about 12,000 kids. And much of the work that we still do is in the area of education and realizing the potential of how we can realize the full potential of these children. When the Jaipur Literature Festival, when we all set it up 17 years ago, this was our fundamental focus. How can we get young people to have access to considered information and deep dive from the best brains in the world and make literature and writing and knowledge and inquiry sexy? And by making it sexy, really get them excited about coming in here year on year and getting to start reading, etc. Today, 80% of our audiences at the Jaipur Literature Festival is below the age of 25. And apart, it's quite amazing because most literature festivals, as Nancy and Charlie and Sital will tell you, are more people of our age sort of group. But more importantly, we also reach out to 110 schools during this period where writers go to these schools because the schools don't have the wherewithal to bring their kids to us. So that's the focus, and that's what we're going to speak about today, innovation and articulation through our education system. In case you're wondering why you've got Archie stuck up right there on the stage, I'm absolutely honored to be able to introduce you to Nancy Silberkleit, who's the daughter-in-law of Louis H. Silberkleit, one of the founders of Archie Comics publications. Recently, she stepped into the role as co-CEO because nobody else wanted that role. And like she said, she actually started reading when she was 54. She never read books, she never read comics, but at 54 that changed, and we'll talk a little bit about that. So Nancy, welcome. I'm so delighted that you've come here all the way to India. There was a movie, Archie movie, that was recently released here, and that was made it even more exciting. For some reason in 2019, I got an email from the York University in the UK saying, we'd really like to invite you out to York, and we would like to confer you a degree. And I'm like, I'm unlettered. Why would you want to confer me a degree? But they did for some strange reason. And we have Charlie Jeffery, the president of the University of York and the Vice-Chancellor here. For those of you who haven't been to York, and I hadn't been till last year, which was 2023, I made various excuses, let me tell you, about not going up there. Principally because the train system sucks in England. But I finally did make it up to York, and it's the best kept secret. It was the built heritage there is extraordinary. The Minster is, oh my God, and it even has some of the best bars that you can spend a lot of time in. So thank you so much, Charlie, for being here with us. Priyank Narayan is the founding director of the Center for Entrepreneurship at Ashoka University. As many of you know, Ashoka University is considered to be amongst the best universities in India, and I'm not saying that from an Indian context. I remember I was in MIT giving them a bhashan about what's the next big deal, and something about Ashoka came up, and everybody seemed to know Ashoka University. And why is that astonishing? They're only, I think, 7 years old, or 8 or 9. 9 years old. That's extraordinary for a university to have caught the imagination, not just of folks here in India, but across the world. So, Priyank, congratulations. Congratulations for Ashoka. I met Sital first through her book. I had no idea who she was till very recently. Her book landed on my table. It was called Court on Trial, and her session is over. It's tomorrow. The Court on Trial is a book by Aparna Chandra, Sital Kalantry, and William Hubbard. It was the most fascinating book that I'd read for a while. If any of you follow the justice and the legal system in India and understand the challenges that you have to read this book, have to go to her session tomorrow, because it really lays bare some of the issues that we don't get to understand till you actually look at the statistics of what happened. So that was the book that came on my table, and I think it was June or July, Sital, when this book reached me. And I told my colleagues in a programming meeting, we meet every week for a programming meeting, and I said, this is something that we have to do. And that's how I discovered her work. And then more recently, late last year, maybe October or November, I landed up in Seattle. As many of you know, we're trying to do a JLF Seattle. And who happened to be the dean and the head of the Indian studies there but Sital Kalantry, purely by coincidence. And I'm like, oh my God, that's a coincidence. So delighted to have all the way from the United States and Seattle. Sital Kalantry is a law professor who writes on law and legal institutions in India and the United States. Her new book, like I said, Court on Trial, is incredible. And she's written over 40 articles and has won numerous multi-million-dollar grants, as well as a Fulbright Distinguished Scholar. So I'm going to start with Charlie. Charlie, why is it that every education institution spends all of its time trying to tell a kid what not to think and only what to study?
Well, I hope we don't do that in the University of York. I think I get the message of your question, and I'm going to answer it by reference to some words I'll say in my graduation speeches next week. We have graduations in February. And I talk about how important technical skills are in our various fields, but I also say how quickly technological change makes those redundant, so we cannot simply rely on technical skills. So I say to our students, what I hope we've also given you is wisdom. Now, wisdom understood as the ability to think outside of an academic discipline, to engage with others working in different disciplines, to be open to working with others from different places, different cultures, different nations, from which you can learn the different perspectives which can help you solve the problems that might be facing you. And we try to anchor and institutionalize that in our teaching in all sorts of ways. But let me give you one example. We have something called the Sustainability Clinic, which is actually an academic course. It's an academic course available to anybody in the university, whatever discipline they're taking. It's for credit, so it counts to degrees. And it involves, under academic supervision, a team of students from different disciplines working with a local organization in and around York, helping them to address whatever it is they think is their problem in meeting environmental sustainability goals. I think that's an example of the kind of skill set that we need our students to leave our universities with, focused on problems, focusing your particular academic discipline on that problem, but recognizing that that's not going to be the whole solution, and you need other perspectives on it. I think that's the kind of education, and I know that's the kind of education Ashoka is absolutely embedding in its programs, that we all need to aspire to.
Priyank, thinking out of the box, how do you get young people to think out of the box when through their school, if they've done something that's out of the curriculum, they're told to go and stand outside the class because they've been more naughty puppies?
So, Sanjay, let's look at the history a little bit of the way this education system came about, right? When we inherited the colonial education system, it was designed not to get the child curious. It was designed not to question.
A colonial way of keeping control, which is how...
The purpose of the system was to create people who will follow instructions. And we've continued with that for way too long. And there have been attempts, and universities and schools have tried to change that, but I think a systemic shift has to happen to change that, to bring in the curiosity and the questioning that we want in our students. A lot is being done, by the way, with the new education policy. There are elements of actually bringing in this flexibility, skill-based education, not just sticking to one discipline and so on. But that systemic shift has to happen. It has to happen at the teacher level more than the student level, Sanjay, and that's where the challenge is. Because the teachers are not trained to teach with that flexibility. And the curriculum design has to also change with that flexibility. So I really hope that what we've tried to do at Ashoka is one attempt, but can that actually scale across the country is something we would definitely want to see.
Sital, one of the things that's really inspirational about America, at the fundamental level, perhaps in school, a lot of the American students perhaps still can't count or add up or read. But when you come to university, for some reason, at least that changes. And the way you've been able to build in the thing of inquiry and research is exceptional. And it's really become the mecca of education for most people across the world, challenged, of course, by Australia and Canada and UK. It's shifted. How did that come about? And how is it that you're able to hold on to some of these best minds? What is it that institutions like you offer to students that they go there, they never want to come back?
Great, thank you. And thank you for this panel. Thank you for being here to the audience and for plugging my book, 2 o'clock tomorrow. So, I think, yes, I don't want to say that America is the best. I can tell you from my perspective, law schools are very unique. So for the about first decade of my teaching career, I taught something called a clinic, where it's experiential learning. Students represent poor, marginalized groups in cases or in strategic matters. And this experience is life-changing because they interact with people from different cultures, different religions, and largely our students, particularly at the elite schools that I've taught in, are themselves elite and have never crossed this barrier. And this learning by doing, which really comes actually from a 20th century philosopher, John Dewey, who everyone may know for the Dewey Decimal System in every library, but he emphasized the need to hands-on training. And to just give you one example. So in my clinics, I brought students to India for over a decade. One of the project was on surrogacy, and we were working on a report. This is before India banned compensated surrogacy or foreign surrogacy. They went to a surrogacy home. What they met, right, 9 American students, they met pregnant women, usually 7th month, 6th month, having to be there because to protect the investment that was made by the IVF specialist, and there were no chairs, so one couple of chairs came in, a woman was sitting, she was 7 months pregnant, a poor, extreme poverty, doing this to make money, and she gets up when my young white male student comes in, and she sits and squats in the corner and says, "No, you sit." And this was shocking to my 25-year-old white male student, was like, wait a second, a 7-month pregnant woman is doing this. What does that say about her social position in this country and how she feels? And what does it say about his social position, combined by the global hierarchy, compounded by race, compounded by caste, compounded by gender. And he talked about this endlessly. You know, it made him realize who he was and the privilege he has and the need, right? But we all sat on the floor then, because there were no chairs. And he asked her, tell me about yourself, tell me what your issues are, what your concerns are, how we can help you in this report. So he learned about her. He learned to experience what she does and talk to her in ways that he never would, and wrote a report which was then cited extensively by the Standing Committee of the Indian Parliament.
Nancy, I'm going to come to you in a second. Charlie, going back to you, you know, she talked about this mix of different people. When I came out to York, I was astonished by the number of international students you had all the way into Middle England at York, at the university. What does that do for learning between groups, between peer people? Does it sort of lead to more disengagement or more barriers, or does it lead to more understanding of each other? You had a huge number of Chinese students at a time where obviously China is a bad word in most parts of the world, but you embraced them.
And I think there's an in-principle point there about the value of engaging beyond your own culture. And that's one of the main reasons I'm here in India. I've come, obviously, for the festival, but also for some other things.
He was in Orissa a few days ago.
Yeah, in building relationships and partnerships with other Indian universities. And there's a really, really fundamental reason for that. And that is because India is going to have now, and for the next few decades, a really big proportion of the world's young people. And that's a big proportion of the world's future vitality. And I think it would be a dereliction for me not to want to engage with that and to engage our students in the UK with that, whether here or in the UK. So there's a really fundamental point there about the benefit that we can get for all of us from engaging across cultures. That requires a sense of humility. You know, we don't have all the answers, but we can find the answers we need better when we work with others. There's a practical question that you asked, which is how you best support a really diverse community in a university setting. Now, I think we have an advantage in York, which perhaps not all universities do, because we're a campus university like Ashoka, in which we can take a lead in providing services to our students, services of different kinds for different kinds of student. That can be language, it can be study skills, it can be simply offering people the chance to profess their own culture in an environment where others can appreciate it. We have to work really, really hard at that. 23% of our students are from beyond the UK. We have to make them feel a full part of our community.
Making you feel part of a community. Nancy, Archie Comics, all of you have read Archie Comics, or is it a different sort of generation? Or one person raised their hand? Okay, most people know Archie Comics. Why comics? I mean, why is it that comics has always been so easy to access? And the second part of that question is a more difficult question, did the Archie comic actually promote in many ways cultural differences? And was it a barrier for religion as well as color?
Well, that's many questions I'll have to say. What did you say? But I first must say, Zam, wham, wow, Jaipur. This is my second time in the great city of Jaipur, and India is such a huge part of Archie Comics. So now what was the question? But you asked comic books.
Comic books, creativity, why is it so exciting for young kids to be able to access it as their first point of reading?
Well, engagement to learning is key, and I will emphasize that word again, engagement. And comic books, they are not like regular books, but every type of literature must be explored. And comic books compel different languages. It has the minimal text and then the rich graphics. The graphics are a language, and that is what attracts people to turn those pages. And I did not see 100% hands up. Don't be afraid to say you are still reading comic books. We have readers from 7 up to 80 or even older still subscribing. But graphic literacy is a language, and those thick, inky black lines and the vibrant colors and the action of the figures and the expressions on the face all spark the reader for critical thinking. And that is serious reading, because we want our young students who are graduating schools to be able to solve the problems we have today. They have to tap into that critical thinking that the mind is, always exercising. And you get so much of that with comic books. So if we have teachers here, bring comic books into your classroom, because it's like a bowl full of candy. And you said something earlier, no safe place to dream. You saw these students, not students, just young souls, and not having access to books. Books, all types of books, give you that opportunity. But when you're seeing graphic literacy, you really get to dream high, because you could show one of our stories to, 10 different people, and they will all interpret the graphics differently. But remember, it's critical thinking that's going on up there, and taking the opinions that they see and internalizing them, and that feels good. So that is part of, just a small part of what attracts young people to comic books.
One of the great experiments that hopefully is going to be launched is something called comics in India. I don't know whether Nina and Payal are somewhere in the audience, but amazing. I don't know, Nancy, whether you saw what they were doing. Comics, that online program that I introduced you to Nina on email. Yeah, amazing. But going back to Archie's, did it promote class? Veronica, Reggie of a particularly different class. And what about its action when it came to color, especially color and the problem in America?
Especially
in America, color. You had very few African Americans, for example.
You have not read our comic books. We've become very diverse. We have many, Archie Comics was started in 1941 by 2 families, and my husband and the other side's son brought it into 2nd generation. And you said, I just became CEO a short time. It's been 15 years. And that's how long, when you're in a family business, it takes for you to go gray, 15 years. Because you can check out pictures of me. But, I brought it into 2nd generation with my partner, John Goldwater, and we have many new characters because we want to reflect society. We want to reflect who is in our schools today. So we have all types of characters, many new characters that show different skin colors. And I also commissioned a new character that's autistic. And she's from the Philippines and her father's from Ireland. So we have, that cross.
And now with the big Archie movie in India, do you have a fancy Indian character in the Archie comics?
The movie is spectacular. I have seen it 6 times. And what that movie has done, it has heightened people's desire to visit India, because a lot of the film was shot in Ooty. I want to go to Ooty. And I was saying, oh my gosh, how far are we from it? But I think every time I watch the film, I get so much more out of it. And it's just fabulous, and it's all from your director and the actors that live here that gave Archie another dimension.
Thank you. Priyank, again, comics creativity. How does that contribute in terms of education? You run the Innovation Center. I keep saying that much of what we do here is about the intersection of the arts, knowledge, and innovation. Why is that so important, and how do you sort of further that in today's day and age?
Right. So the sense of creativity and innovation is a skill, a thought process, and a mindset that we need to inculcate in every student today for a very fundamental reason, which is we are really creating or teaching students for jobs that don't yet exist. We have no idea what they're going to be doing. I won't even say 20, 30 years from now, 5 years from now, 3 years from now. So the only skill that you can give them is actually to be creative and be innovative with whatever they're doing, to be that lifelong learner, Sanjay. And the core of that is what she was talking about, critical thinking. How do you look at a problem differently? How do you look at a problem and analyze it from different perspectives? That becomes the core of what we are teaching at the university. And that can be taught through any subject. So you can learn critical thinking through a subject like philosophy or history or sociology. And the whole premise of liberal arts education is to create intersections. There is a philosophy which says there is no new knowledge, everything is a rearrangement of what exists. That rearrangement is actually fusing different disciplines together. It's called the Medici effect. It's actually a very nice book which is called the Medici effect, which talks about how different disciplines collide and create new disciplines, and new knowledge actually comes out of it. So the core of actually teaching today, learning today, parenting today is getting them diverse experiences, appreciating the diversity. It will also give them the whole sense of inclusivity, which is, again, more and more and more relevant in today's time. And that's going to create the curious and a creative learner, which we all want to do. It's not just the responsibility of the teachers. I think the fundamental of this starts at home. The whole concept of parenting also has to change. Sanjay, one of the things that I often ask my students, who's the first innovator or the most innovative person or the most creative person you've come across? I haven't got a different answer. Can you guys guess who? Fantastic, look at this, right? Who's the creator? Who's the entrepreneur at home? Your first entrepreneur. Entrepreneurship starts at home, right? Entrepreneurship is all about problem solving. So if you can solve problems at home, you can go solve the problems across the world. And that is really the fundamental that we are trying to get to through various systems within the formal education system and also outside.
Sital, Priyank talked about the mother, in this case, the woman being the most creative. In India, more and more, every time you see exam results across the board, across demographics and across states, we are seeing more and more girls are able to score higher marks than boys. And yet, at some point of time, they fall off the system. Is that true of the United States as well? And therefore, what is it that you all can do in universities to be able to keep them within that system and continue to help them move forward?
Yes, thank you. So, of course, as you mentioned, while we have relative diversity and equality in terms of numbers in universities, even here in law schools, mostly 50-50. But what happens, as you say, afterwards, right? Why does India have such a low participation of women in the labor force? I've been to so many panels here today about India and economic growth, but this hasn't been highlighted. If you want economic growth, get women into the workforce and figure that out. This is not a panel for me to talk about that. So in the United States, I tell my students, I show them the charts, and I say, look, there's not a pipeline problem here anymore. The pipeline problem doesn't exist, but in the legal profession, in the last 25 years, we've seen the increase in number of judges to 35%, increase in the number of professors to 35%, although, to be honest, my first-year students, I'm the only woman they see all day and all night, and I'm only the person of color they see all day and all night. So how can they be inspired, right? But I'm the one talking to them about it and telling them, yet, partners at law firms, equity partners has been steady at 25% over the last 25 years. So it hasn't increased or changed in the profession as much as we'd like. And certainly, my other topic of tomorrow is why it hasn't also changed in the legal profession in India. But in the US, it's really, I don't think it's a university's problem. The only thing we can tell our students, I tell them, look, I mentor them. This is what you need to do to survive in the workplace. You have to, these are bad tips, but these are sad tips that I have to give them. You have to make sure you tell them, that all that matters is career. Don't have a child until later. in these professional settings and get mentors, get male mentors, not just female mentors. So that's what I feel is my role, and to be their mentor and to inspire them, because if they see, I have a lot of Punjabi students in the diaspora in Seattle, and they come and talk to me and say, I never had anyone like you. I've never had anyone like a role model like you. So I think we can promote more people of women of color and women in our universities to help our students feel like they too can make it.
So in America, and Priyank, this is also for you, Indian America, what's the sort of, there's a lot of people in academia who are women. How many of them are sort of, top of the pile, right on top, heading institutions? Sital, both for you as well as for Priyank, across India and America.
So we've seen now a lot of women actually heading institutions, being in positions, not just as a head, but also as deans or as head of departments and so on.
Across universities, across the country?
Well,
I
think there could be definitely a lot more, but I think that changes.
Number, 30%, 20%?
I think it'll be about 30 to 40%, but
Sital in America?
Commit to that.
Top of the pile for women in academia, deans, presidents, universities?
I don't have the exact professors. I can say, in law, it's about 35%. It's not 50 yet, but the top level, I'm not quite sure. Yeah, but I was giving a talk at Global Law School on Monday, and all around me were all these women who are deans, and so my good friend, Vice-Chancellor Raj, said, hey, look all the women we have. And I said, yes, because they have to do all the work. You become a dean and you do all this admin work. So we see that as well. Because so the teaching that I'm doing is really heavy and hard. And I said, look, I'm doing all this administrative work. Yeah, but we need a woman to teach so that they have a woman, right? So all of the burden also falls on the leaders who are women, because there's so few others who are on the lower levels that can do the work.
Charlie, you of course have a chancellor who's a person of color and a woman to boot. But tell me, how has technology changed the way education runs today? COVID, of course, changed everything, and we know that. This trying to study out of home instead of school was a completely different environment. But how do you see this, the technology sort of coming into education, and what's the need of the moment? And what's your sort of vision for the next sort of 5 or 10 years using technology?
I'll give you two perspectives on that. One's a general one. We have to embrace it. One of the most impressive interviews of a professor that I did recently was about AI and its challenges. And he said, hey, I get my students to use ChatGPT to write essays for them, and then I get them to mark those essays. In other words, embracing that technology to see what the mix of the machine and the human can do in productive combination. I think that's the approach that we all have to take in understanding how technology can transform the fundamentals of teaching, the fundamentals of research, the fundamentals of how we cohere as a community. Let's embrace it and work with it and improve because of it. The other thing I wanted to do, it goes back to a theme that you were talking about earlier around the arts. We have a political atmosphere which tends to downgrade the arts as an academic field and to focus on STEM, science, technology, engineering, and maths. Now, technology is transforming the arts. If you go to my school of which combines the creative arts. We call it Arts and Creative Technologies. It's music, it's film, it's theatre, it's television. If you go to our archaeologists, they are STEM departments now. They are technology departments. You cannot do the things that they do without embracing technology. Digital creativity, driving on the creative industries in the UK, and I'm sure here in India, one of the most important industries we have. The technology is really important, but the art behind it is much more important. So I think we've got to think really, really positively about how technology can add value to our traditional academic subjects.
Oh, totally. And this is the time to plug Samsung Tabs S9 series. You can use it to find creativity. But Charlie, going back to you, you know, technology in many ways has also led to plagiarism, and that's become the big issue in academia across America, across the world. Students use Google or sometimes WhatsApp even to be able to do their papers. Do you see that to be a hindrance, or do you see this to be perhaps an opportunity, irrespective of the fact that there is plagiarism built into it?
As I said, we've got to treat it as an opportunity. Now, clearly, some of those opportunities are for students to do things in ways that we wouldn't want them to do. But if you can harness the opportunity of technology and get students to think about it as part of their learning, and as part of the learning that will prepare them for their careers, because whatever they do is going to be transformed by technology. So if we can get them to think about that and find ways reliably of assessing it to understand how well they are doing, then that's absolutely where we need to be. Frankly, we can't seal ourselves off from technology because, you know, students are going into every engagement in the university with a computer in their pocket, which is far, far, far more powerful than the computers that I was using when I was a student. So, yeah, we have to embrace technology, make it work for us, and get our students to work with us on that.
Computer in your pocket? No, you can use Galaxy S9 Tab series in your pocket. But Nancy, tell me a little bit about why is it so important to be creative? And is there this age, you know, for example, in India, you can't learn design, you can't go to design school till you finish your 12th standard. And then you start learning design. Why do we need to build into our curricula arts and design and innovation and creativity from day one?
Well, arts is where you can bring in any academic, and I wanted to jump in about, you know, getting more women, more female into the man's position, and being the only female CEO in the comic book industry is high on my shoulders. So I utilized the arts. I commissioned a story in Archie Comics where we had an ambassador from Rwanda come and speak to Riverdale High, Archie, and all of them. It was on environment. So I love bringing in as many academics I can, but through the arts, because I think that is where people will engage into the conversation. So you always hear in the United States, we're cutting the arts, but the arts to me is one of the most important subjects you can offer a student, because you can engage them in any topic and they'll be interested to hear. So if I was going to talk about, you know, think about being a CEO, think about being an ambassador, what are you talking about? But reading a colorful story in a comic book format, I think engages the conversation with more comfort. So I don't know how it is here in India, but the arts play a very important part in a child's education, because you can bring in any subject you like.
And you know, you said that, I remember when we were having a chat, you said you came to reading at 54 and you hadn't read neither a book or a comic. What brought you to reading, and how has that changed your being?
Well, Archie Comics was started by two families, and my husband brought it the second generation, and it was about 15 years ago. He and his partner died, and no one was running Archie Comics. So I was brought in as a CEO, and a big problem was, as you said, I had never read a comic book because I had no love for reading. So I had to bring home all those comic books and start reading them. I'd pile up the ones that made me laugh, the ones that had impactful values. And then all of a sudden I felt I didn't have enough to read. So I started going to bookstores and buying books. And like magic, I fell in love with reading. So it was a matter of just getting me to sit down and turn the pages and get lost and dream in that wonderful activity, R-E-A-D. So it was Archie Comics that helped me find the love of reading. So I missed out a lot of decades of enjoying books. Books are fabulous. I now have books and comic books by the side of my bed.
Love for reading, very important. I'm going to open it up to the audience in a second, so keep your questions. But I'm going to ask Priyank to sort of, in some way, You know, Priyank, one of the things is we've seen that you have all of these thousands, tens of thousands of schools and educational institutions across India. You have these kids who've then been able to get out of school, perhaps do something at a middling level, not necessarily get into the best universities in India, and they go out to the Americas and they do mostly phenomenally. The same kid who hasn't quite been able to master his or her or their math or physics or chemistry blossoms. And in places like Seattle, whether it's at Boeing or at Microsoft or at Amazon, they completely populate these wonderful spaces. Why? What is it that we have failed at? What is it that they know that we haven't been able to do?
I think it's to do with, Sanjay, the way we've been teaching them, right? I think that we've boxed them in a lot
How many
of ways.
teachers in this audience? Any lots of them.
Yes, yeah. There are a lot of constraints of the system, one. So let's not brush that away. There is a curriculum, there is a board, there is a syllabus and a timeline that every teacher needs to follow. And we're very, very strict about that, right, at the school level. Number two is also, it's very numbers driven. It's really about the grade, and that's the only thing that we are driving home. So if you're not getting into that 99% range, you're not sort of making it. And on top of that, we blame the teacher also, saying that, why is the teacher not being able to do this? So I think there are a lot of systemic challenges that are happening at this level where we're not letting them think. Moment they go abroad, they get a chance to think and they see a much larger canvas. They do well because some of the core fundamentals are also very, very strongly driven. For example, they've become very good numerically. They've learned to read. They've followed a certain discipline. So the discipline helps, but at the same time, it is also a huge change in the way education is delivered in some of the universities abroad. And that change works for some people, and there are also cases, Sanjay, where it doesn't work, so we are not necessarily happy about it.
Charlie, the hunger for knowledge, the hunger for learning, do you see their difference? I mean, we've received your education system primarily, and you may have moved on, we haven't, or we're now trying to move on and go beyond what you guys left with us some time ago, better or for worse. But do you see the hunger of kids who have come from outside of the UK as opposed to the kids who are from the UK and have access to your educational institution?
Well, absolutely, because the decision to go and study somewhere else at great expense to someone, whether it's a government award or a family support, it requires a huge amount of commitment. So I think we really, really see that in our international students. And it's not just in studying as well. And one of the really, really striking things is that we run lots and lots of volunteering programs at the University of York, where students help out in some way or other those who are disadvantaged in the city. It is disproportionately our international students who take advantage of that kind of opportunity. I think it's a thirst for experience alongside the education because of that tremendous investment by someone or other in giving those opportunities. It's really, really remarkable.
I would have loved to talk about campus education, but let's take a few questions. One in the front. We'll take them in clusters and then we'll respond because we're going to run out of time. So one mic here, then the gentleman in the blue sweater at the back. Go ahead.
I'm Abdul Samad Ibrahim, former member Board of Management, Indira Gandhi National Open University. Two questions, one to Nancy and one to Charlie. Because I find that, what the point Charlie raised is extremely important for...
Straight to the question, otherwise we won't.
The question is that, he said that what India is a big hope for the world. When we see it as a big hope for the world must invest in India, in its democracy and its secularism. Comics, yes, of course. Can't we have a character like Darit Narayan? Today we know that, Lord Rama has been portrayed as a militarized Rama. We need to rediscover, go back to the concept we had of Dalit Narayan. If there would be a character in the comics, if we can teach that character and it reaches down to the hearts, and if the West, both UK and USA, support India, not in culture and values which are now both being militarized. but in the corrected culture, in the corrected
I think we got that.
Okay,
we got that. Gentleman in the blue sweater. Right there. Are there any girls? Yeah, I'm going to ask some of the ladies.
I'm sorry to, I suppose, a slightly sour note, because I want to return to the idea of transforming the world. And it's not going to be transformed by transforming a small number of elite students. I've taught for over 50 years in the UK and in America and China. And my view, and this is the question, is it not really about recruiting, retraining, and retaining the best possible teachers, particularly at 11 to 18-year-olds, which obviously is outside the brief of your speaker?
Great. One quick one here, right in front. Short question.
So how do we as educators and researchers face the challenges of intersections of identity faced by our learners?
Identity. And one last one, wheelchair. Gentleman in the wheelchair.
Sir, I quote Nandela.
Ask the question.
Education is a powerful tool that can change the world. How to transform education? Because some countries developed, some countries just developing. So how can make a collaboration to transform education?
So if you want to talk about transforming education, Charlie, Nancy, you've already got your questions. If you want to take the larger question of, how do you retain teachers, good teachers?
So I think you're absolutely right. Teachers are the core fundamental of education. So we do need to, at least in the US, public education suffers because we work them too hard, we don't pay them enough, and we're failing. I think the public education system is failing. So that clearly needs to be transformed. With respect to India, I did just want to say, I think that the trajectory India is on is a natural and normal one, right? You had a closed economy, which then opened up in '91, but now the educational system is opening up with the new educational policy. I've seen the globalization here of India and the mindset of the government trying to globalize, which they should do. And how do you retain kids here, right, was your initial question. There's a capacity constraint here, because most of the education has been provided through these government schools, and private schools were looked down upon because it was seen like profit-making. But I think you need to enhance or increase the pool of education, the higher education here, so you can satisfy the needs of the students. It's not just that we're so amazing and wonderful in the United States. I think it can be done here.
All right. So I'm going to talk about transformation of education. We've written a book called Leapfrog, Professor Sood from IIM Ahmedabad and I. And we've talked about one fundamental thing. By the way, it's available outside. The core of it is shift from skill set to mindset. So if you can create a growth mindset, you create an entrepreneurial mindset, you will be, as educators, as education systems, we've always focused on skill set. If we need to shift to the mindset, training a mind differently, to think and think continuously for every challenge that's coming about.
Charlie?
Two things briefly. Firstly, the gentleman about the masses. Schools are too late. We need to intervene in the very early years to make sure that life chances are as even as possible. So even before school. And the gentleman in the front, I detected a certain note of criticism of aspects of Indian politics in your question. And I could have spent a lot of time suggesting that some things in British politics aren't exactly where they should be. What I think is that if we engage across our countries, we can probably find our ways to improved solutions.
Nancy?
The arts are very important in a child's education, and that's where my first comment was engagement. We need to engage the minds, and I strongly believe it's through all of the arts that you can tap into the interest of a child's mind to go on and learn and be interested and wanting to excel and dream. Dream as high as you like.
Engage the minds, allow people to dream, and further that, thank you. We could have continued this forever. Thank you so much, Sital Kalantry, Priyank, Charlie Jeffries, Nancy, thank you for this brilliant conversation.